Hey Hardies, I'm Casey.
And I'm Cammie. Welcome to the Hardies Hotline,
your connection to Hope Valley.
We want to give a shout out to our friends at Edify Films, where you can get fabulous When Calls the Heart merchandise, like my hat.
And you can also get a fun When Calls the Heart game from our friends at the Bundle Game. Be sure to use discount code Hardies Hotline for 10% off.
We've got a fabulous episode for you today, full of laughter, tears, and heart.
So take a walk with us to Hope Valley and let's dive in. Hello, Hardies. Welcome back to the Hardies Hotline podcast, your connection to Hope Valley. Cammie and I are doing something a little different. We're just switching it up. You're getting 2 episodes again this week because, well, we just can't stop talking about When Calls the Heart.
We can't
quit. we just can't quit.
We can stop anytime. We can.
It's very, very hard. So we're going to do a little mini-sode today. I mean, I don't know how many it's going to really be, but tomorrow we are going to do a full recap with our good friend Jess. You might recognize her from Delivery Me, a podcast in which we recap Signed, Sealed, Delivered, Hallmarkies podcast, or Once Upon an Upside, which is all about Up TV stuff. So she's going to be joining us tomorrow. And you guys, she's not here so we can talk about her, but Cammie converted her.
She's watching When Calls the Heart, and she's doing it at 1:00 in the morning, her time, on Monday morning, to do it with me at midnight. Isn't it great?
And she's not a romantic, and this is full of romance. So this is like really big stuff.
This is big. This is big. And I have it on good authority that she got a little bit squealy during this past episode.
Did. Surprisingly enough, because we're chipping away at that non-romantic heart of hers.
Yeah.
And speaking of chipping away, Cammie has gotten her husband to watch When Calls the Heart.
Unbelievable. We are at season 7 Christmas, Home for Christmas. And okay, guys, my husband has been Team Lucas, nothing but Team Lucas. He won't even look at Nathan as an option. And finally, with the tree decorating scene and that very steamy but brief look that happens when Nathan is helping Elizabeth put the bird at the top of the tree, he finally said, okay, now I see Nathan as a viable option. Thank you.
A viable option.
A viable option.
Oh, man. Well, my husband has kind of sort of somewhat agreed to watch season 6 and 7 with me. Hallelujah. We watched episode 1 of season 6, and he was kind of like crickets. So I made him watch the next episode where Lucas is introduced.
I was about to say, neither one of them are in there. So his whole point is kind of moot.
Well, I was kind of like, we have to start, I mean, if we're going to do it, we got to start at season 6, episode 1. I mean, like.
Oh, yeah. That's where we started. We just watched 2 in one night. So yeah,
we didn't have time to watch 2 in one night. Yeah. But I made him watch Lucas's entry, and he was kind of like, okay. Now, you all know he's been Team Lucas just because I like Nathan more. So we'll see how this goes. We'll see if he can bring other perspectives to me, because it's good. It's a great conversation to have. Now, let's get into the breadcrumbs.
Okay, so this may or may not be a breadcrumb, but I just have to put it in before we go into the story breadcrumbs. The music at the very end of From the Ashes, episode 3. Did you notice what was being played?
No, I did not.
It was the exact, I don't know the title of it. I'd have to look at my CD, but it was the exact same music when Jack left for the Northern Territories.
Oh.
In season 4, right after he proposed. It's the exact same music. and you think about the heartbreak that Elizabeth and Jack were going through at that point, specifically the music cue that I recognized was specifically when Jack got off his horse and gave her that one heck of a kiss goodbye. When all of us were bleary-eyed and sobbing and trying to still watch the television. So that, I believe it's the clarinet or the oboe playing right there. And that played right when the triangle happened. And the men are stepping up. Nathan steps up and looks at her, and then Lucas turns around and looks at her, and she's right at the pinnacle. So what I took that to mean is all these characters are going through a lot of heartbreak right now. And we saw a lot of heartbreak on Elizabeth's side. We saw a lot of heartbreak on Lucas's side. We saw heartbreak on Nathan's side, but just not to do with Elizabeth. His heartbreak happened at the very end of episode 2 involving Elizabeth, but he's got the inquiry coming up and the adoption is being pushed back. And so you have in season 4, these two characters who are being separated from each other with a love for the ages, and they are going to just feel like their hearts are dying without one another. And then you have this triangle where all 3 characters are going through a lot of heartache. And so, yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
That is pretty mind-boggling, not gonna lie. I did not piece that together, and now I want to go back and watch season 4 episode whatever it is where Jack leaves.
My Heart Will Go On is the name of it.
Yes, duh. Yeah. Yes.
I can't remember the number, but
yeah. Okay. But going deeper on the music.
Okay.
Jack is going away from Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm.
Lucas is also walking away from Elizabeth. Is that a parallel? And this is a stretch.
That's a stretch.
The Northern Territories because he's a Mountie? Like what?
He turns around. He turns around. So I don't think that we're going to get that parallel there. But somebody, I think what we can say is somebody's going away. We don't know who it's going to be, and nobody's leaving Hope Valley, but somebody is going away from Elizabeth's heart.
Mm-hmm. So I asked the Hardys on Instagram. Erin mentioned before the season started, follow the breadcrumbs. Did you find any Easter eggs? And a lot of people have pointed out the fact that in that scene where there's the triangle, Elizabeth exits left.
Okay.
Where Nathan is on the left.
Yeah.
Lucas is on the right.
Oh, okay. That might be a bit of a stretch. But
I mean, to be fair, her house is to the left. But I mean, she could have turned around and gone the other way.
You mean done a full circle and gone back?
Yeah.
But then we wouldn't have gotten that great far shot.
The far shot was great. The far shot was really great. But I don't know. Is that one of the Erin hints? We don't know. I just wanted to put that out there because
I think that's looking really, really, really deep.
Since the beginning of season 6 and 7, the writers have teased this whole idea of the tortoise and the hare. Nathan being the tortoise, Lucas being the hare.
We've already seen the hare.
We have there. Okay, so here's the thing. There were a lot of tortoises and hare references here, at least a few that some of the Hardys have pointed out to us. Several Hardys.
We saw the decoration on the table by Helen.
Yes.
It was a turtle.
That was a turtle.
Yep.
Also, remember a couple weeks ago, we were talking about that poem, the poem that Hippity Hop to the Candy Shop, which is also to the barber shop.
And who went to the barber shop?
Who did go to the barber shop? That was Lucas. That was something that I believe it was Wilma had pointed out in my DMs and stuff. And I was like, okay. And then I'm sorry, I don't remember who wrote this, but somebody else mentioned to us that Baby Jack talks about liking carrots and radish when he's with Rosemary. And what
one line
like that? Not turtles, but bunnies. That's rabbit food. Carrots. Again, like I said, this may be completely bonkers in left field, but it's actually kind of fun to look for these little possible Easter eggs.
It is. It absolutely is.
We talk about this a little deeper tomorrow, but little Jack is also playing with the Monte and the horse. So people are thinking that's another clue. All right, the last Easter egg of this episode. And again, take it for what it's worth. But our friend on the Instagrams, Hardy's team Nathan, saw this very interesting, I don't know, hint, clue, Easter egg. Lucas is carrying a bunch of books out of the library.
Yeah.
And Hardy's team, Nathan and friends, were able to kind of scope out these books. I'm going to read you the post. They gave us the permission to share this. So shout out to Hardy's team, Nathan and friends. All right. So here's some of the books. Freshwater Gastropods of North America.
Dangerous Liaisons was
wait. Gastropods. Those are snails. The triangle is going at a snail's pace.
At least for our liking.
Yes. And I think for some of the guys as well.
Oh, you mean
Nathan and Lucas.
For the two guys. Oh, I mean, these poor guys, they must feel discouraged.
Mm-hmm. Then we have Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, which there is a white rabbit. And our friend Laura Lynn, who you heard on the podcast last week, has a whole blog post about this. So make sure you go check it out. She's also Colorado Hardy, in case you've forgotten. The book is also upside down, but there is also an upside down scene in the book as well. So, there's also Fall of the House of Usher.
Can I just say really quick that this love triangle is turning all three of their lives upside down, with Alice in Wonderland.
Yep. And that is a wild goose chase as well. Ooh.
Yeah.
The next book is Fall of the House of Usher, which is actually by Edgar Allan Poe. It's a short story. And they write, this book is about fear influencing behavior.
Well, and that book, Fall of the House of Usher, that was mentioned in season 6 because I just watched it with my husband. It belonged to Harper, and his mom said that he had to give it to the library because his mom thought that it would give him nightmares.
Edgar Allan Poe would give anybody nightmares.
Edgar Allan Poe gives everybody nightmares. But he gave it to the library. In that episode when they're going through the books and shelving and they read The House of Usher, and then that's when they decide to go out to the cabin because Allie tells them about that cabin.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was already in the series.
Yeah. Interesting. There's also Dangerous Liaisons, which we
know was in the series.
His favorite book. This is not a romance novel.
No.
We will let you at your own devices Google that one. And then there's also Adventures of
your discretion.
Use your discretion advised. And then the next book is Adventures of Mary Jo Figg. Okay, this one's a little different because Hardy's team Nathan puts here, this book is part of the Fiona Figg mystery series. Fiona?
Yes.
Fiona Figg. mystery series. I mean,
not so much Figg, but Fiona.
And then, that also ties back to the whole hippity hop to the barber shop idea. I mean, is that a little hint and a clue? The other books, those are just the books that Hardy's team Nathan analyzed. I have a few more books here that I caught. The Count of Monte Cristo.
Ooh.
Was also on there.
The story of someone being taken away from the woman he loves.
Yes. And according to Wikipedia, I'll read you a synopsis really fast. Before he can marry his fiancée, Mercedes, Edmund, first mate of the Pharaon, is falsely accused of treason, arrested, and imprisoned without trial in France. So, who's going to be
about to start an inquiry?
I mean, who is going to start an inquiry? Who might be falsely accused?
And may I also say that the false accusation came because his best friend, who was jealous of him marrying his fiancée, blew the whistle. He made up charges and blew the whistle. Now, I don't think that has anything to do with Lucas and Nathan, but it could have something to do with Andrew.
Mm-hmm.
He's making up charges to try to blow the whistle on him.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's interesting.
Mm.
The other one is His Last Beau, which is a short story by Arthur Conan Doyle, aka the author of Sherlock Holmes.
Right.
So this story has been interpreted as a propaganda tool intended to boost morale for British readers. So is this intended to boost morale for little Hardys such as ourselves? I don't know. Could be a stretch, but wouldn't put it past Brian Bird and friends. So that's that. And then the final book is The Adventures of Huxfin. So, I mean, maybe it's the connection of Lucas being from the South and Huxfin is also in the South.
Or remember the season premiere of season 7. Boys, are we behaving like little gentlemen? No. And they have that look. Nathan and Lucas have that look toward each other like, oh, neither are we. So they're behaving like little boys fighting over Elizabeth, and Huck Finn had a lot to learn. He acted like a little boy.
Huck Finn did have a lot to learn. Now, those were the books mentioned that we could see. Now, if you guys saw any other ones, or if you guys have any other deeper connections or anything like that, I'd ask my husband. He is not a reader of these types of books. So sorry, can't give any insight from him on this one. But Hardy's team Nathan and friends, they did a fantastic job laying it out, because I was like, I didn't even think to look at the books, but now I'm like going to be like looking at every little detail. Every detail. Like, oh, the carrots are blooming. That must mean Lucas is winning.
Oh my goodness.
I just, it's just fun to look for the Easter eggs, honestly. Yeah. It might mean nothing at all, but it's just good fun. And it's great conversation with you guys. Like Kimmy and I just love interacting with you all and hearing your thoughts and everything. So those are just little fun tidbits. Those were just the Easter eggs. Can you think of anything else before we dive into discussion about next week?
Well, I mean, this has nothing to do with any insights, but I just loved how adorable Lucas looked carrying that huge stack of books and talking over it. He just looked cute.
Yeah, I was kind of like, good thing you're tall with long arms, because that's a lot of books.
It's a lot of books.
Next week. Let's just cut to the chase.
Let's just cut to the chase. Fort Clay.
Fort Clay. Okay, disclaimer. Previews are supposed to throw us off. Not that we can be thrown off by the whole Fort Clay thing, but sometimes they make things worse than what they seem. Sometimes they make things better than what they seem. Sometimes you're just confused. So just let's keep that in mind, everybody. Like, deep breaths. All right. Bill says to Nathan, you must know Jack Thornton's last assignment was in Fort Clay. Almost verbatim.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't say, to me, he doesn't say it as a question. He doesn't say it as,
no, he's saying, well, you gotta know that. Like, you gotta know this.
See, I didn't read it like that. I just read it as he was making that statement, like, you must know.
Oh, okay. So we read it two different ways. Okay.
That's why I'm talking to you about this. Yeah.
Yes.
Because it can be left up to interpretation. He didn't say, you must have known. I read it as downward intonation. You read it as upward intonation.
I did.
So, I mean, okay, let's back up for a second. Let's talk about Fort Clay. Now, bases are big.
Bases are huge.
It's not just one squadron at a base. You have multiple squadrons of dozens and hundreds of guys in each squadron. I mean, for example, here, NAS Pensacola, we have the Marines, we have the Navy, we have the Air Force. They are all training. That's a lot of people. Yeah. And you might know of people or you might hear their names, but you actually don't know them.
Right.
So, I mean, for Bill to say, you must know, that it's leading somewhere,
It could be informing him.
Mm-hmm.
It could be informing him of it. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, what was your interpretation?
Of Bill or just the news that he was at Fort Clay?
I mean, Bill saying that to Nathan.
See, the way that I read it was, you got to know this, right? You are aware of this, because that's how I read it, because saying, almost warning him that you're treading into some very deep waters here, because this is going to get messy. Mm-hmm. If you were at Fort Clay, because that was Jack's last assignment, that, right? Mm-hmm. That's kind of how I read it.
Yeah. I find it interesting that aren't they in the inquiry room when he says that too?
Not when he says it. It goes so fast. So when he says it, it looks like they're in the jail. Mm-hmm. Because Nathan's kind of got his arm on the back of a chair. Mm-hmm. And Bill is standing up in front of the desk. So it looks like they're in Nathan's office when he tells them that. But a millisecond before that, you see, I think it was Andrew. It went by too quickly. You see Andrew, you see Nathan turn his head. Mm-hmm. And I believe that may have been at the inquiry. Mm. But yeah, it goes like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Then Elizabeth walks up to Nathan in the middle of town and just blurts out, Did
you ever meet Jack? And you get 1 second of a look on his face like he's about to start explaining, and cut.
Oh boy. Oh boy. I am not going to lie. I started having a little bit of heart palpitations. I started thinking like, oh no, please don't do this to me. Please don't do this to me, Brian Byrne and John Tinker. Please don't do this to me. And my big thing is, because this is a new showrunner, my immediate thought went to continuity.
Right.
Because we know from season 6 being introduced to Nathan, and I watched it back last night, just his scenes where he's in the conversation talking about Jack.
Right.
He says to Elizabeth, I did not have the pleasure of serving with your late husband.
Right.
Again, think of the Fort Clay situation.
But by all accounts, he was an excellent Mountie.
Right. Again, forts are big. He could have been in this squadron here, and Jack could have been leading. Jack was leading new recruits.
Right.
Nathan could not have been a new recruit. They're about the same age. I mean,
I wrote a fan fiction that explains why he was a new recruit, but it was far-fetched.
I mean, if you want that storyline, go to Cammie's blog story, fan fiction. You could go read it.
Hookedhardy.com, the new arrival under Fan Fiction Friday. Look it up.
Boom. There you go.
It's one of my better ones. I'm actually quite proud of it. And I wrote that when Nathan was first introduced, when we knew that he was not even when he was introduced on the show, when we knew he was coming to Hope Valley. Mm-hmm. That's when I wrote that. So I wrote it as he could be a romantic interest, or he could just think of her as a sister.
Yeah.
I wrote it to leave it open-ended. So
there you go.
Have fun.
Boom. There you go. When he's talking to Lee, now this gets a little sticky, y'all.
It does.
Unbiasedly, this gets very sticky. Lee and Jack, or not Lee and Jack. Lee is talking with Nathan as they're going to investigate the stagecoach robbery and the bridge and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. Lee is prattling on. He's got his inner Rosemary like coming out of him, and he's just like da 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 da. Then he starts talking about Jack. Then Lee starts talking about how he had a lot of friends in town, and like he was such a great guy and such a great friend and all of that stuff.
He was one of my best friends.
And then he says to Nathan, "Did you know Jack?" To which Nathan says, "No, I never had the pleasure."
Right. Okay.
The word no, K-N-O-W, it's very ambiguous. Very ambiguous. And I mean, it's hard for me to say, like, if somebody said to me, like my brother, and he said to me, "Do you know Mary Smith?" And let's say I have heard of the name Mary Smith and I can see the face just because we were in college together, but I never really met them. I've just heard lots of great things about them. I might have seen her in the orchestra at a fine arts event.
Right.
I would say, no, I know of them though, but I don't know Mary Smith in that context.
Yeah.
We're walking on thin ice. We're walking on thin ice. I mean, what do you think, Cammie? What do you think of that interaction that Lee has with Nathan, especially knowing that Nathan is a man of very little words, and even his dad Archie says that.
Yeah, economical with words. It's one of my favorite lines that comes out of Archie Grant's mouth. So, I'm taking this a couple of ways. Number one, it could be that he heard of him, but he did not know him. He knew who he was. That's been established. By all accounts, he was a great Mountie. He was an excellent Mountie. So, but I never had the pleasure. That leads me to believe that he never had the pleasure of going up, shaking his hand, saying, "Hello, I'm Nathan Grant. Hello, I'm Jack Thornton."
Never had the pleasure of like playing darts, something to drink at the saloon.
Well, and I mean, the other thing is, we're pretty certain that Jack is a bit of a legend. And
you know what? You're right. You are right on that. I have forgotten because Jack single-handedly,
took down the Tolliver gang.
Yeah, and that was a very big thing. They had all these people looking for him. I mean, like they were expecting a bunch of Mounties to take down the Tolliver gang when it was just Jack and Superintendent O'Reilly.
Yeah.
And then
he was Superintendent O'Reilly.
And then he goes to the Northwest territories. And I think, wasn't he a legend up there too? Wasn't he like, that's kind of why he was.
We never heard about him being a legend, but he commanded a squad. Mm-hmm. And so we don't know, because Jack didn't want to talk about it. We don't know about the kind of heroics that he did. But
right. Jack never talked about his.
Yeah, but you can tell that he cared about his men and he took care of his men. And when you're like that in the military, you earn a reputation. Mm-hmm. And when you take care of them so much. So he could very well have known of him. There are two other ideas that I have that fully support this, besides serving in different squads. So I have this idea of Nathan and Jack sitting across from each other in the mess hall and just talking. They're just talking over dinner. They don't exchange names. At first I thought that I was kind of silly, but then I thought, how many times have I just started talking to somebody in line at the store or at the airport, and then
or like at PTM, you're just talking to their mom, just shooting the breeze, and you totally forget to get.
No, but what I'm saying is, how long have I gone on in a conversation for about 20 minutes, and then I say, oh, by the way, I'm Cammie, So I have this picture in my head of Nathan and Jack sitting across from each other in the mess hall and just shooting the breeze, and not exchanging names.
Mm-hmm. And it is 1918. It's not like today where you get a picture of yourself in the paper, or you get your picture of yourself and then on social media and everybody knows your face.
Exactly. So here's another thing, and this would wipe the slate completely clean as far as Nathan is concerned. If they did serve together, but if the mission was classified. And Nathan can't say anything about it.
Yeah. Now I know what the rebuttal to that will be. Well, it's his wife. She has the right to know. What would you say to that?
Not until the case is closed, not until the danger is over. And maybe at that point, it still wasn't.
I mean, I think even...
Well, and the other thing is classified, and you do not tell anyone until it's been cleared. And
until you're allowed to. I mean, it can be cleared.
That's what I'm saying. Until that's what I meant. Until you're allowed to. And once again, we're talking 1917, 1918. And so it may take a while for him to get the clearance that it's okay to talk about it now. So there's that. Now, I mean, this is going way back, far down. And it's just that he was a man of few words. He didn't know Lee. He was a perfect stranger. And depending on how intimately he knew Jack, which I'm thinking that he didn't know him well. I don't think he was his best friend or anything like that, but he probably didn't want to talk about it. And Lee was a perfect stranger, rattling his mouth off. And Nathan is not. He said, not unless there's something that needs to be said. And that didn't need to be said in his mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you totally didn't think about the classified information. I mean, I think that's going to be really, if that's the case, I think that's going to be really hard for Elizabeth, because as a wife, you want to know what happened to your husband.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, and if you knew somebody who had that information and all this time you thought that they didn't know anything, and all of a sudden you find out like, actually they really did, that would be really hard for me. I'll be honest.
Yeah, it would be. But if he's under an oath, then
right. I mean, if it's under an oath. If it's classified information by the government, then it's classified information by the government. Like he could get, he can get fired from the Mounties. He can get, I don't know what the repercussions are. But even today in like 21st century, sometimes people do not find out what happens to their spouses if they pass away, like serving in our military.
Yeah.
Because of classified information.
The other thing that I thought about, and this is a little sketchier, but the other thing that I thought about is the way that fighter pilots are. You know, you sit down and have a beer together and talk, and then the next morning, the guy who was sitting right next to you dies on a mission. So it could be that Nathan met Jack one night and then he was gone the next.
Yeah.
So that's a possibility. It would still be sketchy. I'm still the classified thing is like diving deep down. I am still going that Fort Clay is a very big place, and he was probably in a different squadron, and he probably knew his name, and maybe he had somebody point out to him who he was. Or maybe, like you said a while ago, Casey, he was part of the rescue team to help dig Jack out, but either he was dying or he was dead.
Yes. Okay. So
which would support my fan fiction story, kind of. It would support one tiny little piece of it.
Yes. So because of my little romanticized heart, because I'll be honest with you, I was really sad at the fact that we never actually got to see the final Jack and Elizabeth, like Elizabeth running to Jack and Jack's like dying there. Anyways, so I've conjured up many scenarios in my mind to make it a lot more Casey romanticized and stuff. But my thought is it could be, so remember when in season 3, Jack helps with the landslide and he meets Harper's dad, and Harper's dad is dying, and he basically says, you know, my son is Harper and this is my wife. Tell them I love them. And then he dies. My idea, which, I mean, maybe I'll just write this fan fiction if this whole story doesn't go my way, is that maybe, so there's the landslide. A bunch of men are called up to do the search and rescue, and Nathan gets to Jack, and Jack is dying and says, my wife is Elizabeth in Hope Valley. Watch over her for me. Which is what I wrote in my fan fiction.
We are working on the same wavelength here.
But that would also support the fact of didn't know him, and
never served with him.
And just dug him up.
But it would still be a very romantic version, because I mean, when Nathan came onto the scene, I think all the Hardys really wanted a connection between Nathan and Jack.
Yeah.
And we knew that Jack died saving the lives of 2 Mounties, but there's no way that Nathan could be considered a new recruit. I wrote it in my story to fit, but it was still pretty far-fetched.
Yeah.
I wrote him joining the Mounties at a later age.
Yeah.
But still, you know, so he's too old to be one of the people that Jack saved. But to have a connection between him and Jack, I think would be a very sweet thing.
Yeah.
And it could be a way that Elizabeth finds out about Jack's final moments.
Yeah. Another idea that some Hardys have been throwing around, and I apologize, I should have written this down as I'm seeing it, but there's been a lot that have had the same idea. It's the idea of maybe Nathan was supposed to lead the recruits in Fort Clay instead of Jack.
See, that's what I said in the predictions. That remember that I said that Nathan turned down the assignment and Jack took that assignment. And so he feels guilty because it should have been him.
And the assumption would be that he declined it because of Allie. Not because of Allie, but because of family comes first in Nathan's mind. So
Right. Well, and he was the guardian and he couldn't just leave her for several weeks.
right. So and we do know that Jack was called abruptly.
Yeah.
Because they were supposed to
Mountie shows up in town, gives him the assignment, and he had to be there like that. So much so that they had to cancel their honeymoon and make the trip to Fort Clay their honeymoon. How romantic.
Yeah. So, I mean, lots of great ideas. I'm very excited and I'm also a little nervous, I'm not going to lie, because of continuity. And I just, regardless of who it is, like Lucas, Nathan, Lee, I don't like seeing characters put in a position where they like seem to be like a liar or whatever. And so, just with what we know that what Nathan has said on the show and how that could be interpreted, how that could be taken. And now we are unveiling this idea that Nathan possibly had met Jack. Woo! Getting me a little nervous.
I mean, it wasn't too long ago that we were wondering if Carson Shepherd was a murderer, remember? Because his sister-in-law comes in and says Carson Shepherd is a murderer. But that's because he lost his wife on the operating table trying to do a major surgery on her.
Yeah.
But his sister-in-law could not, she couldn't accept that. And so she called him a murderer.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of ways that things can be explained and a lot of ways that things can be taken. I keep going back to Star Wars. So what I told you was true from a certain point of view.
Fair point.
Many of the truths we cling to all depend on our own point of view. It's the Jedi way. Okay, that's not a quote, but
fair enough. Things to think about. Before we wrap this up, I'm going to go back because there was one other little thing that I wanted to talk about that has nothing to do with the triangle, has nothing to do with Rosemary and Lee, but has everything to do with the speculation that somebody on the show is pregnant.
Oh, no, I say no, not yet.
Do you all think that Clara is pregnant? And I'm not going to lie, I saw the preview of the explosion and then Rosemary's running to Lee and Claire's standing there with both hands on her stomach. And my first thought was, is she pregnant? And I texted Cammie immediately and I was like, wait, we got to justify this because realistically on the show, it's hard to have babies on the show.
Yeah.
Everybody has said it. I mean, that's just a thing in Hollywood. It's just really hard to have infants, small children on the show. Jack is still he just turned 3, right? The Taylor twins. The
Taylor twins just turned 3 in February. So while they were filming this, he was 2.
He was 2. So this next year, they'll be 3 years old. That's still really young. I personally don't think that they're going to give Jesse and Clara a baby.
Not yet.
I
mean, it would justify her emotion bubbling over in episode 1 in open season. But when you see an explosion happen and you wonder who is there, you're going to feel sick to your stomach.
And that was what I thought too. I thought maybe this was her way of showing that she was going to pass out and throw up because remember, how did she lose Peter?
In an explosion.
That is, and now Jesse, who it was nowhere to be found. I mean, he could have been going over there because Lee had been at the oil derrick.
He had an appointment.
So it could be feasible. I mean, I can see in Clara's mind, well, if Lee was going there and Jesse's his right-hand man, maybe he was there too. Lee shows up because nowhere to be found.
And when you see Lee and Rosemary hugging, Claire is over there clutching her stomach, breathing, heaving. So I do not think that she's pregnant. I think that I think it's completely and totally just that she was feeling sick to her stomach and she was trying to calm herself down and not vomit.
Have a panic attack because
Yeah.
having lost Peter in the mine disaster and now seeing it with her own eyes, the oil derricks blowing up.
Yeah, exactly.
Jesse nowhere to be found. Yeah. So yeah, those were just some other fun little things that I saw that were points of discussions of this episode. But we will see. I mean, you know what? John Tinker has surprised us 3 out of 3 weeks so far. So, I mean, you know what? If a little Flynn baby is on the way, well, I will be very shocked and I will applaud all you folks who had the faith that she was pregnant.
And we'll say, well, now it all makes sense. with all of her emotion.
Emotions. I guess we're going to just wrap it up. I mean, man, guys, I mean, when we started this podcast, I thought we would just do like, oh, we're just going to do 1 episode per week. And then John Tinker's like, nope.
Not if I have anything to say about it.
All right, Hearties, have a great rest of your day, your evening, and we will see you back tomorrow for our full recap with Jess. Bye.
Bye.